Humanity's End started out in 1994. I'd just written my first novel, The Journey Home, and I decided to write another story about a guy, DERASI, VORDE. It was kind of more of a Battlestar Galactica type thing. They were searching for a new home and they came across the moon drifting in space. They didn't know what it was. They'd heard about a place called Earth, and they investigated it and followed their way to the Earth. And when they got to Earth, they found out that all the Caucasian people had been ejected from the planet, you know, maybe 1,000 years before. There was a big race war, and the Asian and the black people had kicked off the Caucasians from the Earth because the Caucasian people had created a disease that would, you know, was specific to race. So it was kind of a anti-racism story originally.
I think it's a very well-written script. And the story is beautiful and needs to be told, and it's an interesting way that they're telling the story. My character has just a lot of, you know, everyday people in him. He's not the normal hero that you're going to see. He doesn't want to be a hero.
Bipolar Armageddon was a much smaller, tiny film. We shot that in upstate New York. And also Nephilim, which I guess was the original start of the whole story about the Nephilim. Then Battlespace, my first big sci-fi film that I did, that was shot in Arizona, and we had a pretty small budget, and I think we originally had a huge budget, and it got cut into like, you know, into almost nothing because somebody went broke at the time.
And that was really probably what I considered to be his defining breakthrough into the science fiction field. His previous films were perhaps a little more horror orientated.
We got that film done, and you know, it started, you know, the whole adventure in space. And I guess Battlespace proved to me that I could make a science fiction film for almost no money and sell it. And some people like it, some people don't, and that's fine.
It was then that Neil decided to mount a much larger and bigger scoped film with a higher budget. And this became what we now know as Humanity's End. And this was going to be bigger and better in all ways than his previous film.
So originally, my idea was to rent a house in Palmdale in the desert outside of Los Angeles and build the set inside the house. So the entire house would basically be a spaceship, because when I was a kid, I always dreamed of building a spaceship in my own back garden. But I rented a brand new house, and unfortunately all the electrics hadn't been done, and the place was a bit of a fire hazard, and there was like dust clouds coming through because we were right in the desert. It wasn't really appropriate. So I moved out of there, moved back to Burbank, which is the real Hollywood in you know, Los Angeles. And I rented a small apartment there, and you know, the plan was then to basically find a warehouse or somewhere to shoot the film. We came across Laurel Canyon Stages, and they had pretty much a full spaceship set built already. So we modified that. You can see the spaceship set used in other movies. If you go compare all the films shot in Laurel Canyon Stages, you can see ours really had a great look. Obviously that's attributed to our DP, Massimiliano. He really did some amazing things. But when you rent a proper studio, of course, it's not cheap. These were pretty reasonably priced studios.
Neil decided that we needed a bedroom set for DERASI that matched the set stages at Laurel Canyon, but something that we could build ourselves and would have 24-hour access to, so that we could take our time shooting the scenes on that set. Neil flew back to Australia, probably to sell another one of his houses to finance the film a bit further. And in that week that he was away, myself and my colleague, Mr. Emmett, constructed a fully functioning set in the lounge room of Neil's apartment. We didn't exactly have permission to do this. We kind of brought all the materials in at night, sneakily up the stairs, big sort of loads of timber and tools and all sorts of stuff. And when we were constructing the set, it was summer in LA, and it was quite hot, as it does get there. And because of the sound involved in construction, we weren't actually able to open any of the windows or doors. So it was really quite hot, and we were working away, sawing and cutting and building. So However, one night when I was spraying the entire set black, it just became so overwhelming, the cloud of paint dust, that I actually had trouble breathing and lost vision partially, just due to the smog of paint dust. Every single piece was used.
So this is a spaceship set built for how much?
$723.
That's pretty good.
Less labour. There will be no gaffer tape as major prop items in this film.
Unlike the last film. Emmett and Blake were really the two kingpins in the whole film. They were the ones who pretty much did all the work. But, you know, the results really were, I guess, a testament to their hard work and my supervision.
Day 9 of set construction. What appears to be our final day on this wonderful little set that we've built. We should have some nice shots of it very soon in its completed form. It's been a labour of love, blood, sweat and tears.
Who cried?
When you dropped the beam on my head, I almost cried.
I guess without them, the film just would never have been even close to being as good. These guys saved my ass a couple of times over the years, and again on this film. The two of these guys together are like an army of 100. I was pretty proud of them and pretty thankful.
And you walk in and it's unbelievable how it transformed into these 4 walls into a real live space cabin. I mean, it was really remarkable that when you walked in, you really looked at it and it was just, how did these guys do this? It was really phenomenal. It just felt real. It was perfect.
The construction of the weapons went along quite well up until the point when I had to actually paint them all black, and due to the previous experience of painting inside the apartment, I felt it would be healthier to take them outside and paint them. But being in a residential apartment complex, this wasn't really possible without drawing undue attention. So I managed to climb up onto the roof of the complex, and that enabled me to paint the items without being seen. However, the second day of painting the guns up on the roof of the complex brought some unwanted attention in the fact that we had several, at one point, helicopters flying over, then circling back, and then they seemed to be hovering a few hundred meters above. And it was at this point I looked down on the roof and realized that I had laid out around a dozen large rifles and a half a dozen small armaments and various grenades, bombs. From a helicopter looking down, this possibly could look like some sort of militia or terrorist activity. So the helicopters tore off at great speed. It was at this point I gathered up all the weapons and basically took them down and hid them under a dumpster underneath the apartment centre, and basically went into hiding in the apartment. And it wasn't long after this that a SWAT team arrived and did a patrol around the area and were knocking on doors and stuff. This brought me back to the incident that occurred in America on the first experience with working with this type of props and hardware in the hotel where we were staying. We were doing some costume tests in the car park, and I was all dressed up with military gear and flak jacket and weapons, and that brought some undue attention. That was just a squad car or two at the time, but this recent incident in LA basically brought a fully fledged SWAT team.
Dangerous. There's guys outside the walkie-talkies watching us, management of the building, because they're wondering what we're doing. And they've gotten word of the fact that we're doing a film here. And they will close us down soon, but we kept the door locked.
The real challenge was in the Nephilim outfits, which were basically, the order was that I had to put together 4 Nephilim warriors from basically bits and pieces, leftover items from the previous films. We had all the costumes shipped over from Australia to the States, and I began work on converting all the outfits into something that looked a little more special for the film.
Blake is obviously wonderful. Seems to have, anything that needs to be built or put together, he's totally got under control. I have so little talent for things like that I have an enormous amount of respect for what Blake does.
Blake has a vision. He starts with a vision. He knows what he wants. He's surrounded with tubs full of clothing and pieces of uniforms and odds and ends and bits and gadgets, and he just takes one look at you and he says, yeah, let's put this on you, we'll put this on you, we'll put this on you, there. And you think, oh, come on, and then you go look, take a look, and it's amazing what he puts together. And what he, I mean, this stuff here, we actually dragged a couple of people down out on the street and just pulled clothing off them and put it on me. It was great.
Mr. Blakey, oh, he has a piece of my heart. So loved Blakey. He was there every moment for me, and he wore, I don't know, 1,000 arms. He wore 1,000 hats. He did everything from dress me to make sure my costumes were on the right way and buttoned, to my props and decorating sets.
With science fiction, I've always loved, you know, that sort of space opera fantasy stuff, but I like real character interaction. I'm not into these sort of movies that are just cops in space. I'm into something that's much more epic and grand. So when you want to undertake a film like that and you want to do it on a relatively small budget of $140,000, well, you know, you've got to try to be a little clever with it. Because I've been a director for 22 years, I realized I knew what I was doing and I knew how I could handle a budget like this and make it work for, you know, make it look like $1 million on the screen. So I guess that's the clever way of making movies.
I thought this was just going to be, you know, another film that, you know, everybody does a lot of this.
You know, it's hard to know what to expect because obviously the budget of the movie is very small, but Neil is very committed, and the crew is very committed.
Going on location in the desert was really dusty and hot, but it was such a great experience. It felt like we were on another planet.
There were two scenes that were difficult for me. The scene out in the desert was the first scene that we shot when I was fishing. That was the most difficult scene. And that's when that's the scene that actually forced me to go into the character immediately. It was the first scene of the movie they shot. Because there were so many things going on. I'm talking to, it's not Jay Laisne anymore, now I'm, you know, DERASI VORDE, where I'm talking to a clone here and a clone there and a half-breed here, and I'm talking in my thing here, and I'm looking at a ship over there, and then I'm talking on this, you know, hologram over here, and I have a relationship that's different with all these people, all within a few pages.
And in this case, we were heading into the Mojave Desert. There were times we were heading up into Death Valley, Red Rock Canyon, some quite exotic locations. There was some very hot days out in the desert. There was, logistically, the film was very difficult to mount. When you're taking a whole group of people out on location, you've got to feed them, you've got to make sure they're comfortable, you've got to have facilities for them. There was a whole support crew we had.
Oh, James, Laisne, and I'd be doing makeup.
Just walk past me, guys.
The harshness of being out there without the security of having, you know, tents around, because you couldn't put tents up because it was too windy, put us right into character. And, you know, as DERASI, I'm a fisherman, so I'm just out there fishing.
Well, you know, nobody cared about that old spaceship at the back of the museum. Besides, everybody needs to make a buck.
Welcome to another day in the desert. We're here in, I don't know where the fuck we are, but it's somewhere interesting, and somewhere in California, and we have permits today. It's the first time ever I've had a, it's not often I have permits.
What's the worst experience you've had so far in this outfit, Todd?
I took pieces of rock out of my arm from when I took the first death in the movie. And it was awesome. It was awesome, but I tell you what, a little painful.
Air Director?
Yes, sir.
How far are you bringing me up from? Like back here?
Yeah.
Action.
Set here on the Laurel Canyon sound stages, the ship, it feels real. It's just gonna look amazing on film.
It was big, and you were like, wow, things are really happening. And we got to do some fun shots there, and the lighting got really interesting. And we had a lot of smoke that we had a lot of fun with.
Hey, Blue, I got a surprise for you. Ow! Oh, fuck! Ah. Hands off, lady.
I'm a fucking robot! And Mossy, our DP, was blowing smoke, and we had a lot of jokes made out of that. They even transformed those sets because they were very raw. And these guys came in and just took them apart and just really made it believable. It went by so fast. We were just all enjoying ourselves so much.